Hey, this is Vikki from the farm. So, this is going to be a little out of the ordinary. It's a little uncomfortable, but here goes. I had the privilege of being on my very dear friend Elizabeth Pearson's podcast called On Purpose. A lot of you know her from The Exchange. She does so much to encourage and support women who are on a healing journey. So, my husband and I received really just some life changing news a couple of weeks ago, and I called Elizabeth. And after having a conversation with her and with Eric's blessing, we decided to sit down and talk about it on her podcast. And we called it Finding the Gifts in the Heartache, Finding Gifts in Heartbreak. Eric and I decided that we wanted to share it in our community. Our hope is that you receive something from it, that you also find it helpful along your journey. We'll have season 2 podcast coming out soon on Farm to Souls, but for now, this is just a very personal conversation that I had with my friend Elizabeth. I hope you enjoy it.
Hi, everyone. What a gorgeous day this turned out to be. I almost hate to be inside recording. However, this conversation was so rich, so impactful, and so good for my soul that it was worth every second of being inside. I had the privilege of sitting down with my friend and sage, Vikki Fraker, and I think you will love listening into this conversation today. So, Vic, thank you so much for letting me crash this beautiful day at the farm.
So funny. Sage, I don't know about that, but I am so grateful you're here. I love to have deep conversations with you, Elizabeth. It's one of my absolutely favorite things in the world.
Mine as well. I was just thinking as I was driving out here, when we started this podcast on purpose, it was almost 2 years ago, and you were my very first and my very second guest that I ever had. And I will never forget it. It was on the topic of letting go of the desired outcome. You remember that?
I do. That's a big spiritual principle and a lesson that's ongoing for most of us.
Oh, yeah. It's almost 2 years ago, and I'm still letting go of the desired outcome of a lot of things in my life, right? And in this world that we live in, and so many things that were just completely out of control and felt like we had control, but as we all know, that was a false sense of control.
Yeah, it's all an illusion to pretend like we have control. And so that's why it's really important to practice a posture of surrendering or opening and letting go and allowing life to move through us. And so it is ongoing. And that's why it's so important to have friendships like yours that we can cheer each other on and pick each other up when we're moving down through life and things happen.
Yeah. Normally, when we get together, we laugh hysterically and we have to pause many, many times because we are laughing so hard. But today's conversation might be just a little bit more serious than we're used to, or not used to, because we've certainly had difficult conversations. But I'm just saying, typically we laugh, and this kind of lends to more of a serious topic. And so I just wanted to invite you on because one of the things that I admire about you and respect about you and really glean from you is that everything you do really is a posture. It's not okay, yes, let go of the desired outcome. Poof, you no longer are worrying about the desired outcome. It is an ongoing continuum that we will forever be on in our life and our journey. And I have continued to witness that with you. And as of recently, really, really was able to get a glimpse into. And so I appreciate you being willing to share with us today. But do you want to go back and start it all with our conversation from a week ago when you called me?
Yeah, I would love to first acknowledge about the posture that because it is a practice. And sometimes I think we think other people have it figured out. And really, we're all just trying to figure it out. And so there is such power when we just acknowledge that this journey is ongoing and our lessons are ongoing, rather than pretending like there is this outcome of perfection that we got to hit and stay in. And so really settling into a posture, we take the pressure off ourselves.
Mhm.
It's just what works for me to remind me that this is ongoing and it's not hitting high points of outcomes and crushing it. It's sometimes I get it right, sometimes I get it wrong, but most importantly, I have compassion with myself when I get it right or even when I get it wrong.
Well, I understand it is a posture. I think a posture is one thing, and I also think it's a practice
Yeah.
because the more you do it, obviously, the more natural it becomes. And so, yes, it is a continual practice for you, and you've been on this journey so long that it is more, I'll say easy because I know it's never easy, but it can be
Yeah.
easier for you because you've been doing it for so long. When you are in the throes of something, it is so hard to surrender and let go. And it could really be millions of different things
Mhm.
that you're having to let go of or relinquish control or, hey, you know what? I'm not liking where I am right now. And it might be a season of waiting, but here I am. I'm going to have these open hands and go, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm not in control to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah. So just like even using the posture of openness, and then the posture is to practice openness. But if we have habits and practices of living life with open hands, open heart, open mind, then life flows through us. But if we have a practice or a habit of clenching, tensing, controlling, forcing, as life moves through us, we will come back to that set point, that posture of closing down and controlling.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I was just thinking of that when you were talking about life flowing through you and then this posture of tight hands, clenched fists, that kind of thing. I feel like a lot of us can allow life to flow through us when life is good.
Yeah.
But then the second that something comes our way that was unexpected, unwanted, unwarranted, whatever the word is,
Mhm.
at that time, a lot of times we like clench up. Everything was good and I was happy
Yeah.
when it was going as I felt I was in control. But now all
Yeah.
of a sudden, whoa, something came my way that I no longer can control or want or desire. And that's when a lot of us tense up and
But
clench.
here's the thing, if you really stop and self-reflect and look at your days,
Mhm.
most everything we're not in control of. And so it becomes this pattern of flowing with life or always swimming upstream against what life is bringing to us. And so we trick ourselves into believing that when things are difficult that we close down. But a lot of people, when good things happen or deep connections happen, we close down because it's hard for us to hold the good as well. And so sometimes an open and closed posture, it can look like when good things come, and I'm using the duality of good and bad.
Yeah.
So when good things happen, we're open, and when negative or hard things happen, we close down. And I would offer that a lot of times good and bad things don't determine whether we're opened or closed. The majority of us have a natural rhythm and a pattern of either having an open mind, an open heart, open hands, open posture, everything. And so it becomes more of a rhythm. And so, again, what the conversation today can roll over into is that when life happens, how do I meet life? Do I have a natural rhythm, a natural pattern of trusting, opening, relaxing, surrendering, accepting? Or do I have a natural knee jerk reaction of clenching my jaw, tightening my stomach, closing my fists, like the closing off things that cuts us off from the life that is trying to move through us?
Yeah, I can totally see what you're saying and how it is that muscle that's been strengthened and practiced. Before we move into the deeper part of our
Mhm.
conversation, I'm just going to say this because as you're talking about this is literally what I'm thinking. So 25 years or so ago,
God.
I know I was a camp counselor and they trusted me to take 9 campers with me down the Nantahala River. And
There's the problem.
I wish you could see, everyone could see your face. No, but they they told me to go take these campers down. And I was not a big whitewater rafter. I didn't really know all the things. So I looked at one of the guides who was not going to be on our boat and I said, hey, I'm fine if it's just going to take me down the river. Like I can just go with the flow. And I said, but what happens if we get stuck or we fall out? And he said, if someone falls out, the first thing you tell them to do is to lie on their back, put their feet going down river. And he said, your natural instinct is going to want to fight to go up to catch the raft or be with other people. But he said, just allow the natural flow of the river, but put your feet out first because there could be some big rocks and you could bounce off of them and everything. So as we're talking, my thought process is, no, I'm good when it's good, just going with the flow down the river. But the second I get thrown out, which I did right away, first one, it's like your natural inclination is to fight it. And so I guess that's what I was thinking. But anyway, that's neither here nor there because I really do want to jump in.
But that's a metaphor for life. Like that is such a metaphor for life, is going with the flow of life. Because if we look at our days, like I said, like so many things during our 24-hour period days doesn't go our way or is unexpected or comes out of nowhere, whether it's little things, medium size, or big things.
Yeah.
And so it really is that practice so that when you do get thrown out of the boat, it's just like an automatic response of knees bent, facing down, hands open, on the back, let's go.
Yeah. And it was something that's not your natural. So it definitely has to be practiced. Like you said, you have to practice that over and over for it to become your natural automated response. But I want you to take me back to just over a week ago where you called me and things were as they were one day and then very different the next day. And so you can share as little or as much as you want with that. But I want us to start with that before we talk about what I really want to jump into.
Okay, sure. I choose to do life with my friends on a very deep level. And my husband received a cancer diagnosis suddenly, just through a routine check. And on one day, on Thursday, we were just moving through our day, going through the motions. And then we received a diagnosis that changed our life in an instant. And so the people I'm close with, I have learned to be vulnerable with and allow them to carry, hold, support, love my husband and I during this really difficult time. And so you were one of the first people I called.
And I was not expecting that at all because like you said, we're just all going through life and you think everything is just hunky-dory. And I've heard you say it many times before, like what you think is important one day and the next day it's, whew, that stuff didn't matter a hill of beans. But now here we are with this diagnosis and a new chapter in your story. And first of all, I just want to say thank you for your courage and your vulnerability. You and I both love Brene Brown, and one of the things that she talks about is it's so easy to share 10 years down the road of, let me tell you about where I was, and you're basically looking at a scar, but right now it's still an open wound because it's still very fresh. And so it's even more vulnerable and difficult to talk about. And so I really appreciate you being willing to sit down with me today because I know it is so fresh. And I know that we have a lot of listeners that are walking through some type of diagnosis, for a lack of a better word.
Yeah.
It might be a job loss, a major move. It might be a financial situation, a relationship situation, and things seem uncertain. Things seem out of our control. Things seem, whoa, where did this come from? I don't deserve this or whatever it might be. But I know with the number of listeners that we have, it's like they're certainly struggling with something in an area of, wow, here I am and I have this situation that came to me. Now what? And literally the thing I am blown away at the most, I think in this moment anyway, with you is I came out here this past week and it was amazing to me because even though you're still in that waiting period and you have to wait for your next doctor's appointment and the more specifics and the more information, you said to me, this week has been a gift. And I looked at you like, I'm sorry, what did she say? And you were like, it has been a gift. In our marriage, we've turned towards each other. We have bonded over some things that you would never expect. And yes, I can see that. But I think the thing that just took me back was that was what you were choosing to talk about. That was the focus. And if there's been anything I've learned from you, it's that like I can call and complain about something or tell you this awful thing that happened to me. And you every time are like, what a gift. And I'm like, I'm sorry, did you hear me? Did you hear what I said? And so even driving out here today, they're doing some work on that main road out there. And
The main country road.
the main country road. It's not exactly a 4-lane with lights. But anyway, so they had us stopped. And I was like, man, I'm trying to get out there. And I thought, okay, nope, I'm going out to the farm to talk about what a gift life can be. And it doesn't have to be either or. And so I thought this is going to be a gift just to sit here for a few minutes, take in a deep breath, just think, okay, start mentally thinking about our conversation. And you have taught me that life really is a gift, like the things that come our way, no matter if they're good, bad, hard, indifferent, but it's if we are open to seeing it as a gift, you can receive it as a gift. And so that's what I want to talk with you about today is what does that look like? How do we do that if that is not a practice or a posture that someone's naturally been practicing for a while?
Yeah, I think that for me, it was an offering from Pat, who is my mentor and my sage of acceptance. And it's also big in the recovery movement as well, is surrendering and accepting. And I think we don't even realize throughout our days how much we react and resist to what life is bringing to us. And there are lots of different ways that we can resist what life is bringing to us. Usually we complain. Usually we will reach out to anybody that will listen. We start complaining and spew negativity of what we don't like about what's going on. And so there's this natural, really posture of reactivity. And life is continual and it's always flowing and it's always coming at us. And every moment of every day, we have free will and we have the power to choose. Am I going to resist and complain and be negative? Or am I going to open up a little bit deeper and get curious and find some kind of surrender, find some kind of allowing whatever's happening to happen with just a lot of stillness and pause, not a lot of reaction. And then the energy that we move through with receiving whatever information almost slows us down to go to a deeper place within ourselves, to assess or almost witness what is happening with no reaction. And that doesn't mean that we don't have feelings about it. That is very different. A lot of times we get the two confused. Reactions, emotional reactivity, to me is not the same thing as having feelings about it.
What would be the difference?
Okay, to me, it's awareness. Okay. So to me, if I'm unaware, I will emotionally react and I'll talk about all the things that happened in the past and I'll talk about how this is going to continue happening in the future. And I'll just do this swirling reactivity of extremes. Always, never, like these feeling my feelings are very different. For me, it is more of a pause and an opening and then allowing what is inside of me to move through me and me witness it and almost dance with it, for lack of a better word, but play a part in it and then allow it to move through and keep going. It's hard to explain, but they're very different. Does that sound like real woo-woo and spiritual and all of that?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't sound way out there or anything. It just sounds like, wow, I understand when I'm reacting and I understand when I'm not. But in the moment of a diagnosis or someone walking out on a marriage or a relationship ending that you thought was going to be forever or so many different things, it's okay in that moment. Pausing. And I think that's where it's so hard, for me to wrap my head around thinking, wait a minute, I need to react and then feel my feelings. But no, it's really that first pause, right?
Right. But it's not in the moment that I learned that. It's all the moments I was waiting on the road for the man who put a stop up where the road was closed down and I didn't react. It's all the little ways. It's all the stuck in traffic, the little petty things and whatever in relationships.
When life doesn't
when
go your
life
way.
doesn't go your way.
Yeah.
It's all the practicing and the little moments. So if I hadn't been living on the kind of rhythm that I choose to live on, when we received this about Eric, my response would have been very different. And it doesn't mean that we're not scared. Like we are at the very beginning.
Yeah.
We don't even know what this means, how much is there. Like we don't even know anything. So we're in the beginning stages of waiting. So we have quite a bit of waiting in front of us.
I think the waiting and the moments of what I would say is darkness, some people would describe it as that, have to be some of the hardest moments in a lot of people's lives. It's like not knowing what's on the other side or not knowing what's next or ahead. And it's just that season of, okay, here I am. I don't like where I am, but I'm going to trust.
Yeah, most of life is waiting if you really stop and think about it. Now, we're talking about a major circumstance in life.
Right.
But most of life, whether it's little things or big things, we do wait. Most things are not instantaneous. They're not. They're just not. There is a lot of waiting involved. And so we get to decide if a lot of life is waiting for answers, waiting for relationships. Just think about how much emotional waiting, physical waiting, like spiritually waiting on God.
Oh, yeah. There's so much
waiting.
waiting. You know the visual that I keep getting?
Oh, God.
No, it's a good one. I used to have a massive garden. I used to garden when I had all the kids at home for our vegetables. Mm-hmm. And I would go out there every day and nothing would be happening. And I'm thinking, I put in all this time and I had planted these seeds and I was just waiting and waiting. And then it would finally pop through the dirt and then it would start to grow. And then you're like waiting for the flower or the vegetable to show up. And it's, that was my visual of put in all of this.
But that's life. So if we know that the majority of life is waiting, then the quality of our life becomes, how do I wait?
Well, not well.
But we can practice. So in that waiting, it's a huge, huge opportunity. And it really is a gift to practice trusting. So in my waiting, am I going to practice trusting? Or am I going to take a ride in my mind and just go and go and go and go and look at the past or look at the future and just let my mind take me for a chaotic, miserable, suffering kind of ride? Or am I going to practice feeling my feelings, acknowledging wholeheartedly and honestly how afraid and scared we are, but then use that to trust Eric more, trust myself more, trust God more, and not get lost in the outer layers of stuff that absolutely doesn't matter. Now's not a time for that.
No.
Now's not a time for that. And I get to decide, because there are plenty of people, there are plenty of, I'm sure, websites or groups or places or the internet. There's so many sources, I'm sure, that my mind could absolutely get distracted and lost in. I'm not going to choose that. Right now, I'm going to choose to have deeper conversations with Eric. I'm going to choose to spend more time in the woods on my horse or around my animals. Or Eric and I, for the most part, are pretty disconnected, but I have no desire to watch any TV or...
Okay, wait, just to clarify, when you said Eric and I are mostly disconnected.
Oh, yeah.
I thought you were talking about between the two of you.
I'm sorry.
But you're talking about like technology, the world, social media, Okay, just to clarify.
Yeah, but like I get to choose, because a lot of times when people have intense feelings move through them, the natural choices are distraction. Anything other than to feel what is coming to me and through me.
Yeah.
And because I've been on this path for a little bit, and I know that my feelings can be one of my greatest teachers and my greatest healers. Now is a time for us to be honest and feel what's going on.
Yeah, I have a lot of emotions and a lot of feelings surrounding a lot of things. I feel big, and so therefore I hurt big, and yeah, it can be a lot. I want to go back to this idea of you receive a diagnosis or so many different things that
Yeah.
a listener could be in the middle of or receiving or just have received or in a heartache. And it's a gift. There can be gifts along the way. Like, how did you learn to be aware, to recognize, to receive that even difficult things can be a gift to you? Because again, over all the years I've known you, there's been countless times that I've called you with a situation or a relationship and how something was said to me or handled with me. And you're like, oh, honey, what a gift. So for someone that's listening, they're like, I don't see any gifts in this whatever's happened this season of my life. I don't see any gifts in this relationship. I just hurt, or I'm
Yeah.
scared, or I'm uncertain, or fill in the blank. But like,
Yeah.
how is it not either or? How do you even start with, I want to see the gift?
Well, I think just to answer that like it is so layered. You know me, so you know I don't say it lightly. Oh, what a gift. It's not
No,
dismissive or
absolutely.
any of that.
No, but I will say the first time I heard you say that, I remember where I was. I remember what I had just told you.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh, honey, what a gift. And I literally took a second and I looked at the phone and then I pulled it back and I was like, did she hear a thing I just said? That was my first thought.
Yeah.
Like, how could you see a gift in what I just shared, which was in my mind, heartache? And so I know you now and I know that you don't say it lightly, but I remember back at that, because it was so foreign to me that I was like, oh, she's serious.
Yeah, so I'm trying to respond from my heart and not my intellect because it's a very layered question and I'm trying to figure out how to answer it like succinctly or clearly. And what I will say is because I have endured so much deep suffering in my life through addiction and mental illness and depression and just so much chaos and suffering and confusion. When I started getting sober, waking up, healing, working with Pat, as I started moving through that set point of suffering to some surrendering and accepting, I got a little bit of distance between me and the deep suffering. And in that distance, I was able to see how, because of that suffering, I was becoming someone completely different. And so, because of suffering, because of heartbreak, I have learned that who I become in the process changes. Because I experience deeper suffering, I can hold space for people that are suffering deeply. It almost creates a depth within my soul that it sucks and it's hard and I don't understand it. But who I become in the process becomes who God needs me to be so that I can show up for life differently and other people differently. But even that choice, even that perspective, that's what it is. It's a perspective. It's choosing to see differently, choosing to see instead of life is against me, God is out to hurt me, I'm bad, I'm wounded, I'm not enough, and all that negativity. To see when things happen to me that are hard, that it's not because I'm bad and I deserve bad things to happen. It is because God is good and God is working out something that I can't see yet. And I can choose to trust it or fight it. And because of suffering, I want to make a conscious choice not to add suffering on top of my suffering.
Yeah, but that's what a lot of us do.
But
It just makes it that much harder and we dig ourselves deeper into that.
But we all have the power to choose the life we want. And we absolutely know that if we resist what is coming to us, if we shut down, if we overreact, if we all the things, rather then become awake, aware, conscious, pausing, making wise choices versus emotional, reactive choices. And at some point, we have to consciously choose. Life is hard enough. I am going to wave the white flag of adding more suffering on top of my suffering.
Which is so interesting because it makes so much sense when you say it like that. But yet, I don't know if it's just these repeated patterns that we've gotten stuck in and or just repeated behaviors over and over again. But I hear what you're saying. And what I'm thinking as you're saying this is like a lot of people give me a hard time because I don't watch TV. I don't like movies. I don't like anything that's sad. And what I tell them is life is hard enough anyway. Why would I go to a movie that's going to make me want to bawl my eyes out to watch more suffering? Whether it's scary or sad, or I'm like, life is hard enough. So no, I don't willingly put myself in that situation, but yet I can see, and I have seen patterns in my life where I will do it in my everyday life myself.
But most people do. And we're not conscious because I believe we're moving too fast for too long, cramming so much chaos, like we're on the world's rhythm.
Yeah.
And any time we're moving and accumulating, accomplishing, and all these just continual, there is no pause. There is no break. There is no stillness. There is nothing that stops us from choosing the same thing today that we chose yesterday. There has to be some kind of practice to stop the mind, but we all have conscious choice to do that. But if not, you may consciously choose, oh, yes, I don't want to go to that movie because that could elicit or kick up some sadness or some suffering. And yet, if something comes to you and you resist, you're creating more suffering than 5 movies that are, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes complete sense. So you said something a minute ago about when something happens to you. I just want to ask you this question because it popped in my head. Would you say, and you might disagree completely with this statement, that's fine too, but would you say that life happens for you instead of to you?
Well, that's interesting because the first time someone attacked me on social media was because I had written something about that.
I think I remember that.
Yeah, it was right before Signpost,
yes,
and I had a neck breakdown. I was in the back of the barn crying, going, oh my God, I'd never had anybody. She misunderstood. And so I think sometimes we get caught up in words rather than looking at the energy behind the word. And is it 2? Is it 4? Is it 3?
Well, I don't want to get caught in the semantics, but I think what I feel from you is the energy behind it, if you want to say that. Because I don't know that I've ever even heard you say, oh, honey, life happens for you. Like, I've never heard that. But when you're looking at everything that could be a potential gift as opposed to woe is me, I see it as a 4, which is like an offering, versus a 2, which is like a pummeling or something.
Yeah, one to me is like an angry, vengeful God. Like, I'm going to beat this out of you.
Yeah.
A very punitive God, which I don't even believe in, but that's another thing. Or a very loving God that is purifying something in us because there's a bigger, deeper thing going on that we can't see. And so, again, it's ancient wisdom, and I love ancient wisdom, and I read it completely different today than I used to read it. But a lot of people quote, all things work together
for
good. And so even though, like with this just abrupt diagnosis out of nowhere, I can see that this past week, shit that was important to us and that we were just busting a gut to do and take care of and figure out, all of that changed on Friday morning. None of that was important. So because of Eric and our understanding of God is good and God is working for us, then we're going to trust that even though we don't understand this and we're in a waiting period and we have no idea what the outcome is, we're going to choose to trust that something's going on that we can't see. And so rather than running around panicked, we're going to make wise choices. We're going to call people who love and support us and ask for prayer and healing. We're going to make sure our thought process is focusing on what we want, not what we don't want. And we're going to feel our feelings the whole way through.
I'm not saying this lightly, but man, that's so much easier. I know that this has been a practice for you, but I just want to acknowledge, and instead of just saying, oh, yeah, well, that's great. Way to go. Like, I want to
Yeah.
acknowledge that it didn't happen just today or this last week. It's years of acknowledging in the smaller moments. Okay, when I'm in the waiting or when something happens to me that I don't like. And I think it goes along with so many things. It's just like the baby steps in order to put these things into practice. And we've talked about this a lot, but about I don't love being still for a lot of reasons, but sciatica and other things to boot, but getting old. No, but I just remember even starting a practice of stillness with, like you said, at the red light, just putting your hand on your heart and taking a deep breath, or feeling the water over you in the shower. Like those were my baby steps to adding more time and more intentional moments like that. And I think this would be the same way, right? As far as practicing.
Yeah, because when we receive hard things or information or whatever it is, we get to decide, am I going to add any more suffering on this very hard thing that was just handed to me? And I think when we are conscious and aware, we say, what do I need to think, say, do, move, feel? How do I need to move through this moment so that I don't add any more suffering on the suffering that life has just brought me?
You just said aware, conscious of that. And just this weekend, you and I were talking about this idea of space and allowing space in our days, in our thoughts, in our moments. And I think of you when I hear that word, but when I go back to the world's rhythm and when I go back to all these busy women, I think of the word margin. And again, we're not going to get caught in semantics or anything, but it's, I don't know very many people that have margin in their lives to stop what they're doing, like even to have this conversation, or have enough margin in their lives and in their thoughts and in their feelings to be aware and to be conscious. Because you, like you said, you pick up the phone, you call and vent, you complain, whatever it might be. But I think there are so few people that have moments, and let alone more than 5 minutes of silence. Like I know that's normal for you, but it's like, you get in the car and people pick up their phone. They go on a walk, they're listening to a podcast or on their phone, and there's no space. There's no margin to even be aware of, okay, this has come my way. I can receive it as a gift and look for the gifts in it or not. I'm just acknowledging that with you because, again, this is years of you practicing this. But for a lot of us listening, it's like, well, okay.
But that you just listed practical steps. Sometimes I'm not about action steps because people will cross it off the list and keep going.
Yeah.
And you listed it. Like if you're going on a walk, pay attention to what's going on around you. Pay attention to the walk. Pay attention to the trees, the wherever, if you're not out in nature, the people, like really be alive for the walk. If you're in the car, practice not listening to the radio. Practice not on the phone or whatever. Like practice that silence. Those are action steps that then carry over and really do help you in those hard times. Those are very small, doable action steps.
Yeah, they are. But it's, again, we're so rote with so much of our life that we just, it's like out of habit or without pausing, without reflecting.
But it's a choice.
Oh, it is a choice.
So, and I think the more we can tell ourselves that, the more we realize we're not being forced to look at social media or listen, talking on the phone or whatever it is. We choose that. And so we have the power that we can also choose something differently. Nobody's going to choose it for us. This is our life. And we are 100% responsible for 100% of the choices that we make.
So we have a choice when we receive a diagnosis or when we are devastated or when we are in a waiting season. We have a choice to look for the gifts along with it.
I would offer that. I believe that. I believe that. I do with all my heart. Yeah. And again, it doesn't minimize or dismiss the pain or the heartache in all of it. It doesn't minimize that.
And I know that in you and about you, but I am glad that you said that for our listeners who are like, but you don't understand my story or you don't understand what's happened to me. And yes, I'm so grateful that you said that because it is hard.
It's hard. Life is hard. Life is hard. Waiting is hard.
And
And it is beautiful. It is so beautiful and deep and profound and mysterious and grace-filled and so many things as well. It's all of it. And float down the river of life, open, on your back, with your hands open, your heart open, and trust life.
well, it just seems so contradictory to whether it's the way we are raised or whether it's how we're conditioned, but it's like we want to be able to see where we're going. We want to see what's out there, what's next. And if you're on the back in the river, like I'm visualizing myself on the Nantahala, it's like you have no idea when the next rapids are coming. You don't know when the next bend in the river is coming, and you're just on your back along for the ride. And it's
But if you're awake,
Mhm.
if you're alive, if you're present while you're on your back, you will listen so intensely that you will be able to hear when the next rapid's coming. You will be able to pay attention to all the little things going on with life. So it's not that you'll just be checked out looking up at the sky, floating along on your back. It's that you will be alive and awake for this one beautiful, precious life you've been given, and you won't miss a thing.
It seems so counterintuitive, but you're right. What you just said is if you're present in that moment on your back, you'll hear the next rapids. And I'm laughing because I was like, probably because I was screaming, I didn't hear the rapids.
Right. Yeah.
But no, you're exactly right. So, Vic, you and I have talked about suffering and we've talked about hardship and how life is hard. And I feel like a lot of us, myself included, can add to our own suffering. And it's like, I wouldn't do that with a movie, but I can see it in repeated patterns and not choosing to slow down or to stop or to pause or to whatever. But I know a lot of people, I think, that have suffered in their past, and I see them still there in that suffering, whether it's they had an ugly divorce 20 years ago and
Yeah.
they are still in that.
Yeah.
Or whatever it might be. And I remember us having conversations surrounding that about not allowing that to be our identity. And before we start to wrap up, I just want you to address that because I think it's important.
Yeah, it's a very delicate way to explain my perspective on it, and it's just mine.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that it's right or the only way. But I know in the past, I have done that. I have gone through some really, really incredibly hard things, some traumatic things, and I didn't do my necessary healing. And so because I did not do the necessary healing to recover from that, I was stuck there. And that became my identity. And I lived as though that was who I was, rather than something that happened to me that I chose to heal from and get the right people to help me do some healing work around that, so that I could use that heartbreak to become someone different, so that I could help other people who had a similar heartbreak. I had met myself deeply in that area. Therefore, I could meet other people deeply in that area as they worked through it. And so my suffering wasn't just for me. My suffering in choosing to heal could then actually help other people on their healing path. So it wasn't wasted.
I think so many of us, you hear that and you're like, yeah, that's what I desire. That's what I want. I don't want this pain to be wasted. And I continue to see so many women that, again, they had a difficult first marriage and they were so wounded by it, but they didn't do the necessary healing work. So then 20 years later, they're
Yeah.
still in that, or they entered a second marriage and they're still suffering because they didn't do that healing work to begin with. But I just think it's important that we address that so that our suffering doesn't become our identity.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a part of our story.
It's a part, but it's begging to be healed. I believe we are all called to do our healing work. That's why I believe your work in the world is so important and what I'm sharing out there is important. We are all called to stay on a healing path and help others heal as well. Like, again, we're not other people's healers. They are their own healers. But the more we stay on our path of healing, awakening, whatever words you use, then who we become actually is a gift to help other people do the same. So our healing isn't just for us. And if we want it to become a scar and not a continual opening wound that oozes out on everybody that we come in contact with, then we have to do our necessary healing work. And we all deserve to do our healing work.
Which requires us to pause,
Yes.
to be still, to be aware,
To ask for help,
to
get honest,
to be open,
to stay open, to be willing to do whatever it takes to not bring our past into our present so that it then becomes our future.
Before I ask you one final question, I just want our listeners to pause with that for a second. And if there is a suffering or if there is a heartache or an injustice or something that has been in your past, just to examine, and is that my identity? Am I still stuck in that? Do I still find myself complaining, being bitter, resentful, frustrated, pissed off, angry, whatever that is? But if that is your past,
If that is where you are,
mm-hmm.
that wound is asking for healing. And you deserve to choose some kind of healing in that area.
That could be a mic drop. Oh my goodness, Vic, I could continue to talk to you all day long, and I want to circle back on another podcast with some things that we just briefly touched on, but we're running out of time. And we always like to end every one of our episodes because it's called On Purpose. Like, what's one thing in this area of, wow, when you're stuck, when you're in the waiting, when you're in the hardship, when you're in the heartache, when you've received a diagnosis or somebody has walked out and you just feel like, oh, how can someone also look for those gifts? What would you offer them if they're listening and they're going, I didn't receive a cancer diagnosis, but yes, I have received this. What would you offer them?
I think it would probably be some ancient wisdom.
Okay. Bring it.
Bring it. There is always a knowing that follows stillness. There's a promise of be still and know. And I think that if we want to have clarity, if we want to learn to trust and surrender and allow life to move through us instead of fight with us, that we have to consciously choose some stillness. That really does have the power to change everything, even if it's turning off the radio in the car. It doesn't have to be 45 minutes in a loincloth in a teepee.
Thank God I don't know what a loincloth is and I don't have a teepee. So.
It's little moments of stillness that will actually flow into everything else that you do.
I think the word that I keep hearing over and over again that's resonating with me is it's our choice.
It's our choice.
And we can choose to add suffering on top of that suffering, or we can choose to turn the radio off, to turn the phone off, to turn the podcast off. Not this one, but any other one. Just kidding. But no, to choose it. But I think we're so caught up in life happening to us and we don't have a choice. But no, you're right. We are 100% responsible for our life.
For 100% of the choices we make.
Yeah. So that word choice, like we have a choice to look for the gifts. We have a choice to look for the good because it doesn't have to be either or. It's not black and white. We can be in the middle of a waiting period and a middle of a hard diagnosis, and we can see the goodness that is offered us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks so much for being my friend, and thank you for being with me today. I cannot tell you how much I love our conversations, and I hope you'll come back and do it again with me.
Always. My favorite times are deep conversations with you, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, I love it. And to our listeners, we hope that you will join us next time on Purpose.